Welcome back to the Bob Harden Show. And now here's your host, Bob Harden.
Thanks so much for joining us here on the show. It's brought to you in part by the good folks at Johnson's Air Conditioning, Naples' longest established air conditioning company, as well as Gulf Shore Playhouse, bringing you professional New York-style theater at its very best. Visit the website, gulfshoreplayhouse.org. Coming up, we're going to be visiting with Jim McTagg. He's a contributing editor to Barron's Magazine in Washington, D.C. Right now, we have with us Dr. Zuhdi Jasser. Dr. Jasser is the founder and president of the American Islamic Forum for Democracy. He's also the author of a book that is stirring and moving, A Battle for the Soul of Islam, an American Muslim's patriots fight to save his faith. Dr. Jasser, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, it's always great to be with you, Bob. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Doctor. And for listeners that may not be familiar with the American Islamic Forum for Democracy, what's it all about?
Well, it's a Muslim organization that we formed after 9/11 to basically address the problem at its root cause, not to counter terrorism, which is a tactic, but to operate under the mission that we want to separate mosque and state. We believe that the precursors, the root cause globally of all of these militant organizations, be it Al-Qaeda, ISIS, or Iran or Saudi Arabian regime, is political Islam and the Sharia Islamic State. And we look to reform and modernize our faith. We believe that Islam is in that time in history in which Christianity was in the 17th, 18th century, and it's time to defeat theocracy. So our mission is to defeat theocracy and to teach youth through programs that the best way to do that is through an American style of Islam that separates mosque and state and is anti-theocratic.
You know, and there are not many voices like yours out there, at least through the media. You don't hear many of them. And your book, actually, the title is so meaningful, A Battle. I've read the book, and I was touched by, first of all, the personal transparency that you demonstrated about your own faith, but also about an understanding of how you see through your lens what's happening in the religion of Islam. But an American Muslim's patriots fight to save his faith. Interesting words to define the book.
Well, you know, as we now are finishing the month of Ramadan, you know, we realize that it's a wake-up call that not only, you know, in this month, it's supposed to be a time of reflection, atonement, fasting, prayer, and you know, many of the Muslim community in a very personal sense see their faith as peaceful. And yet you look around, it's been the bloodiest Ramadan in history with not only Orlando, but Istanbul, and now the attacks in Saudi Arabia and Baghdad, the largest bombing in the last 10 years. And what's happening? And the bottom line is there are those of us who are peaceful, in which our religion is peaked. We become more spiritual and more honorable. Then there's others who, when their religion peaks in Ramadan, they become more vicious and barbaric. So we have a problem, and that problem needs reform against laws that are basically in the 13th century. And, you know, in my book, I talk about the fact that what is our legacy? And I think too many Muslims are right now passive and just sort of claiming to be victims, when in fact we have a responsibility living in the greatest country on the planet, the freest society in the world, where we can do the work that they can't do in Baghdad. Really, in Bangladesh, we saw the attacks on ISIS. In the last 6 to 12 months, there have been assassinations of bloggers, of secular humanists, and others that reject any Sharia in government, that want to promote the secular state of Bangladesh, but they've been paying for it with their lives. So we in America have a responsibility, and that's really what my book was about.
Beautiful book indeed, and I highly recommend it to our listeners. A Battle for the Soul of Islam, an American Muslim patriot's fight to save his faith. Now, the reaction that we have from this administration still seems to be, and he says to, you know, well, okay, let's call it Islamic or is it jihad. So what? What does that mean? Do you think the way this administration is handling the problem is Islamic jihad appropriate? Is it appropriate here?
It could not be more inappropriate. They are keeping us basically bare. And, you know, after every attack, Bob, there's all this analysis. Well, what did we miss? What did they, you know, Omar Mateen was interviewed by the FBI. Should they have known? And they saw the Tsarnaev brothers, and should they have known with their travel history, etc. The reason we are missing all of these warnings and precursors is because of the avoidance of the language of jihad, political Islam. The fact that Omar Mateen's father supported the Taliban would have been relevant had we been monitoring the ideology of Islamism and the supremacism against the West. But as long as they only monitor violent extremism, which is the current center of axis of Homeland Security, you'll never be able to hold Homeland Security accountable. So yes, it won't melt away tomorrow if the president calls it Islamic extremism, but in the long-term strategy, it will empower our Homeland Security agents and analysts to begin to look at, and this is what I testified to the Senate last week, was that we should shift from calling it countering violent extremism to countering violent Islamism. And the reason they don't do that shift is we are too beholden to Muslim Brotherhood sympathizer groups in Washington and America, and more importantly, they're beholden to Islamic states, be it in Saudi Arabia or Iran, that are partners with us in countering violent extremism and would never partner in countering violent Islamism.
So interesting. In San Bernardino, not only the government agencies, but also the citizen reaction. As I understand it, in San Bernardino, the neighbors saw some suspicious activity, but said it might be politically incorrect to say or do anything.
Yeah, I mean, the San Bernardino, every one of these, the San Bernardino couple were online taking courses from the Huda school out of Pakistan, which is not a terrorist school, but it is a Salafi jihadi factory that teaches Muslims that the ultimate society is a society that gets back to the 7th century, that establishes Sharia state, etc. So if we had security that was looking at domestic citizens that are taking courses in online jihadi schools, they would have been on our radar. But no, they can't talk about violent Islamism. It's only extremism, and they're supposed to wait until all of a sudden they decide to don suicide vests, get weapons, etc. And often by the time they're aware of that, it's too late and the operation is underway.
I want to get back to something that you'd mentioned about organizations that lobby for and the whole notion of our position that we have here in the United States. What organizations are pro-Islamic jihad in the United States, or at least in some degree supporting a more violent form of jihad?
And this is so important, Bob, is that right now when we look at partners, if an organization sends out press releases that condemn terrorism, then if they condemn ISIS and the act, then they must be our partners. And it's sort of like in the Cold War, when we were fighting the Soviets, we said, the Italian Communist Party, the American Communist Party must be our allies since they're against Soviet hegemony and Soviet imperialism, when in fact nobody would have ever done such an absurdly insane thing. But yet that's our policy right now. We are working with Muslim Brotherhood groups, legacy groups like the Council on American Islamic Relations, the Muslim Public Affairs Council, the Muslim Student Association, and all of its progeny like the Islamic Society of North America, and, for example, Imam Muhammad Majid, Muhammad al-Bieri. These are all leaders of some of these groups that want to make sure that our government does not call it Islamic extremism, because they believe in Islamism. They believe that democratically, just like the Brotherhood took over in Egypt with an election, we found out and we saw that just like in Iran, these revolutions are one-way streets, and then they control the people through Sharia. And these individuals believe in the caliphate. They believe in jihad. They may not believe in violent jihad, but remember, violent jihad is a natural endpoint of nonviolent jihad, just like in Orlando. Violent homophobia is a natural endpoint of nonviolent homophobia. So, the individuals around the president that this White House chooses to give them advice are the Islamist groups that are part of what I call the OIC lobby, the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, those 56 Muslim-majority countries that are sort of the neo-caliphate of today, that voting bloc in the UN that is the Muslim-majority countries that influence these organizations here in America.
Wow, Dr. Zuhdi Jihad couldn't have, unbelievable message. I'm going to encourage you, again, A Battle for the Soul of Islam by Dr. Zuhdi Jasser. Also, I recommend The Third Jihad. You can go to YouTube and look up this video narrated by Dr. Jasser. It is absolutely, and I think still relevant today, Doctor?
Oh, absolutely. We did that film back in 2008 and 9, and yet it talks about the third jihad being a civilizational one that will tap into various weak points in the West and try to suppress free speech and try to promote these organizations, just like what you and I are talking about. Unfortunately, our policies have been so arrested in any type of development that it is as relevant today as it was when we made it 6-7 years ago.
All right, The Third Jihad. Go to YouTube, The Third Jihad, or just put in Dr. Zuhdi Jasser. Doctor, you're doing God's work. Thank you so much for joining us.
Anytime. Thank you, Bob. Appreciate it.
All right, my pleasure. Coming up, Jim McTagg, he's a contributing editor to Barron's Magazine in Washington, D.C. We're going to be doing that and more right here on The Bob Harden Show on the Bob Harden Broadcasting Network.
Stay tuned for more of The Bob Harden Show here on the Bob Harden Broadcasting Network.